They thought they could fence me in. A fancy HOA, a brand new gate, and a keypad lock, blocking the only road to my ranch. What they didn't know? That dirt road was mine. And when you corner a Montana rancher, you don't get compliance. You get war. The trespassers started it. My name is Dan Horsby, and I don't like strangers on my land. That might sound harsh to someone raised behind picket fences and neighborhood watch signs, but where I come from, private property isn't a suggestion. It's the line between peace and chaos. Between a man living free and a man living surrounded. I'm 45 years old, stubborn as hell, and I own 260 acres of ranch land in Montana that's been in my family for decades. This isn't some weekend getaway property with cute little barns for Instagram pictures. This is real land. Land you bleed for. Land you fix fences on at dawn when the frost bites your fingers. Land you bury fence posts into until your shoulders feel like they're splitting. I used to be a forest ranger before I took over the ranch from my father. I've seen wildfires jump ridgelines like living monsters, seen bears wander too close, seen blizzards erase whole roads overnight. So believe me when I say this. I know danger. And suburban people with entitlement? They're a different kind of danger. My ranch sits just outside a shiny new development called Beaver Summit. 5 years ago, it didn't exist. It was just open land, quiet grass, the kind of space where you could hear hawks circling overhead and nothing else. Then one day, bulldozers showed up. Concrete trucks. Survey flags. And within months, houses started growing like weeds. Perfect lawns. Identical mailboxes. White fences that had never held back anything larger than a golden retriever. Beaver Summit was an HOA neighborhood. The kind of place where people smile politely while measuring your grass height behind your back. At first, I didn't think much of them. I figured they'd stay in their cul-de-sacs, host their bake sales, argue about recycling schedules, and leave the rest of us alone. I was wrong. Because Beaver Summit was built close to something important. Something mine. A dirt road. My access road is a long gravel stretch registered under my name since 1993. It splits off the county highway and winds about 1.5 miles through my property before ending at my barn. That road isn't a convenience. It's my lifeline. Feed deliveries. Vet visits. Equipment hauling. Everything depends on that road. And just barely, along the edge of that road, sits Beaver Summit. And apparently, that was all the invitation those people needed. It started small. A jogger or two, early mornings, earbuds in, pretending they didn't see the private property signs. Then couples on bicycles. Then families. Kids riding behind like ducklings. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it would stop. That people would respect the boundary. But respect doesn't grow naturally in HOA soil. Soon, it wasn't just joggers. It was SUVs kicking up dust down my gravel. It was strangers waving like they belonged there. It was people treating my ranch road like a scenic walking trail. One afternoon, I found something that nearly made my brain short-circuit. A Prius. Parked on my field. Just sitting there like it was a designated picnic spot. I walked up to it slowly, staring at the out-of-state plates, wondering what kind of person sees a cattle pasture and thinks, "Ah yes. Perfect place to park my hybrid." Another day, a family set up an inflatable pool 20 yards from my cattle fence. A pool. On my land. They had pop music blasting loud enough to scare the hawks clean out of the sky. I stood there in silence, watching my cows bunch nervously against the fence, and I realized something. These people weren't lost. They weren't confused. They simply didn't care. So I started posting signs. Big ones. Red letters. Metal signs. Private property. No trespassing. And for a while, that slowed them down. For about a week. Then the signs started disappearing. Or turning up knocked over in the grass. And the trespassers kept coming. I confronted a few directly. Told them plain and simple. You're on my land. Don't come back. They smiled, nodded, apologized, and showed up again the next day like we'd never spoken. That's when I knew something was wrong with Beaver Summit. And it wasn't just the people. It was the mindset. To them, land wasn't ownership. Land was scenery. Something to walk across like it was public. And then came the weekend that changed everything. Early May. The grass was thick and green, the air still cold in the mornings. I was out in my southern pasture tightening fence wire when I heard it. A scream. Not human. Animal. My bull. Hammerjack. A 2,000-pound wrecking ball of muscle and horn. I dropped my tools and ran toward the noise. When I reached the fence line, my blood ran cold. Hammerjack was panicked. Crashing against the wire, eyes wild, nostrils flaring like smoke. And just beyond the fence, 2 teenagers. Shrieking. Laughing. Holding a drone controller. The drone buzzed overhead, diving near Hammerjack's head like it was some kind of game. They were harassing him for fun. I shouted, but it was too late. One kid stumbled backward. Hammerjack slammed into the fence again. The wire snapped. And Hammerjack burst through. The teenagers screamed. One ran. The other tripped. And Hammerjack clipped him hard on the thigh. Not fatal. But the gash. It was ugly. Blood soaked through denim fast. Everything stopped. Even Hammerjack froze, snorting, confused by the chaos. I didn't hesitate. I called an ambulance myself. I helped wrap the kid's leg with a torn shirt until the medics arrived. I stayed calm. I did the right thing. And you know what I got in return? Not thanks. Not an apology. Not even embarrassment. Instead, the kids' parents showed up screaming like I'd attacked them personally. Karen and Greg Miller, HOA residents. Their voices echoed across my pasture like sirens. How could you keep an animal like that near a neighborhood? This is negligence. Our son could have died. I stared at them, breathing slow. He was trespassing, I said. This is private land. Karen Miller's eyes narrowed like she couldn't comprehend the words. Well, then your fence should have been higher than 4 feet. I almost laughed. Almost. Because that was the moment it clicked. They weren't sorry their kid trespassed. They were angry my ranch existed. Angry my land wasn't theirs to enjoy. And that's when Beaver Summit stopped being a nuisance. And became a threat. I contacted my lawyer within days. Filed a civil suit against the Millers for trespassing and damages. And it was open and shut. The judge didn't even blink. He stated clearly, the trespassers are lucky the animal wasn't more aggressive. I was awarded compensation. Vet costs. Fence repair. Damages. About $15,000 total. Justice. Or at least, what justice looks like on paper. For a moment, I thought it was over. That Beaver Summit had learned the lesson. That they'd finally respect my road. My land. My boundary. But I underestimated one thing. HOA people don't forget humiliation. They don't move on. They retaliate. The very next week, someone dumped raw chicken guts in my driveway. Then my mailbox got smashed. Twice. And every time I drove past Beaver Summit, I felt eyes on me. Glares. Whispers. Fingers flipping me off behind trimmed hedges. And then I heard her name for the first time. The woman behind the HOA. The queen bee. The one they all listened to. Karen Oldridge. And if I thought things were bad already, I had no idea what she was about to do next. Because Karen wasn't planning to argue with me. She wasn't planning to trespass. No. She was planning something worse. She was planning to take my road. They built a gate on my road. I didn't hear from Karen Oldridge right away. After the lawsuit, after the trespassing incident, after the judge ruled in my favor, Beaver Summit went quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't mean peace. It means planning. I kept working. Fixing equipment. Rotating cattle. Mending fence lines. I told myself the HOA people would eventually get bored and go back to policing lawn decorations. But deep down, I knew better. People like Karen don't accept losing. They don't walk away. They rewrite the rules until they win. And then came the Thursday morning that made my stomach drop. I was heading into town for feed. Routine trip. Same dirt road I'd driven down thousands of times, winding through my property like a scar carved into the earth. The sun was just coming up, spilling gold over the ridgeline. Everything felt normal. Until I rounded the bend near the edge of Beaver Summit. And slammed on the brakes. Because right there, at the narrowest point of the road, was a gate. Not a cheap farm gate. Not a chain across two posts. No. This was a massive reinforced steel structure. Fresh paint still gleaming. Bolted into thick concrete slabs like it belonged outside a prison. There was a keypad lock. Cameras mounted on both sides. Security signs posted in bright reflective lettering. And hanging dead center. A polished aluminum plaque drilled into the metal. It read, "Private access, Beaver Summit HOA residents only. Unauthorized entry prohibited. Violators will be prosecuted." I just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, blinking like my brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an invasion. They had sealed off my road. My deeded access road. Like it belonged to their little suburban kingdom. I stepped out of the truck slowly. The gravel crunched under my boots. I walked up to the gate and stared at the keypad. Like maybe if I looked hard enough, it would disappear. But it didn't. I reached out and rattled the bars. Solid. Locked. Cold metal. I looked toward Beaver Summit's manicured edge just beyond the fence line. And that's when I saw it. A woman standing near the sidewalk. Blazer. Sunglasses. Phone raised like she was filming. Even from 50 yards away, I could feel the smugness radiating off her. Karen Oldridge. She gave me a little wave. Like a queen acknowledging a peasant. Something inside me went very still. Not rage. Not panic. Just clarity. This wasn't about trespassing anymore. This wasn't about offense. This was about control. Karen wanted to prove something. That she could do whatever she wanted. That private land didn't mean anything if her HOA decided it didn't. I stood there another long moment. Then walked back to my truck. Reversed slowly. And drove back up the road toward my barn. The entire way, one thought repeated in my head. Oh, so that's how it's going to be. At the barn, I shut off the engine. Fed the dogs. Stared at the old chains hanging by the tool bench. Heavy steel. Used for pulling stuck tractors out of mud. Used for hauling logs after storms. Used for problems that couldn't be solved politely. Then I grabbed my phone. And called the only man I knew who would understand immediately. Earl Blevins. Earl is the kind of guy who lost 3 fingers in his 20s. And still rebuilds diesel engines for fun. Ex-military sapper. Freelance mechanic. Lives in a trailer filled with tools, spare parts, and stories nobody believes. When Earl answered, I didn't waste words. They built a gate on my road. There was a pause. Then he said, calm as sunrise. You want me to bring the backhoe? I looked at the chains again. Yes. Another pause. Then, on my way. 30 minutes later, Earl rolled up in his old backhoe. More rust than paint. Engine growling like a half-starved bear. He climbed out holding a cooler. Beer? Not yet, I said. He nodded. Fair. I strapped my GoPro onto the hood of my tractor. Not because I wanted attention, but because I wanted proof. If Karen wanted paperwork, I'd give her footage. We drove down the road together. The gate came into view like an insult rising from the earth. Earl whistled low. They really went all out. They really did, I said. I didn't speak again. I walked to the hitch. Grabbed the chain. Coiled thick and heavy like a sleeping rattlesnake. Then I wrapped it around the gate center post. Double loop. Tight. Secure. Earl watched silently, then climbed back into the backhoe. The engine roared louder. He positioned the machine carefully. Hydraulics whining. Steel arm lowering. The chain pulled taut. For one moment, everything was still. Then Earl looked at me through the windshield. I nodded once. He pressed the throttle. The backhoe pulled. Slow torque at first. The metal groaned. The gate shook. Concrete cracked. Karen's cameras blinked, recording their own death. Second pull. Harder. A loud pop echoed down the dirt road. One post tore loose. Third pull. The entire gate ripped free like a tooth being yanked from a jaw. Concrete base and all. It collapsed into the ditch with a thunderous crash. Dust exploded into the air. Earl killed the engine. Silence rushed in. For a second, all I could hear was wind. Then Earl leaned out the window. Well, I walked forward, stared at the twisted wreckage, then reached into my toolbox, pulled out a can of spray paint, and in thick black letters across the broken frame, I wrote, "Illegal obstruction removed. Next one gets burned." Earl chuckled. Poetic. We left the gate right there. In the ditch. Like a corpse. Back at the ranch, I uploaded the footage. Didn't overthink it. Just trimmed the beginning and end. Added subtitles. Timestamp. Posted it to my small personal website under a tab called Land Defense. I figured maybe a few rancher buddies would see it. Get a laugh. That was it. I went to bed early. The next morning, my inbox was full. What the hell? Dude, you're a legend. Someone reposted this on Reddit. I opened the video analytics. 10,000 views. I blinked. Refreshed. 22,000. By noon. 60,000. By midnight. Over 200,000. TikTok grabbed it. Then Twitter. Then Facebook. People were commenting things like, "Finally someone standing up to HOA tyranny. Montana rancher is my hero. Print this man on a t-shirt." I didn't know what to do with the attention. I wasn't trying to be famous. I just wanted my road back. But Beaver Summit? They were losing their minds. The next day, I drove past the ditch. The destroyed gate was still there. But now, 2 SUVs sat on the HOA side. Stopped just shy of the boundary. Watching. Like wolves afraid of the fence. Good. Let them look. Then I noticed something else. A paper sign duct taped to the broken metal. Shaky handwriting. One word. Terrorist. I laughed. Tore it off. Left it in the dirt. Because if defending your land makes you a terrorist, then Beaver Summit had no idea what war actually looked like. That afternoon, a letter arrived. Not mailed. Hand-delivered. Cream-colored envelope. Fake cursive font. Smelled faintly of citrus and entitlement. I opened it. It was from the Beaver Summit HOA legal committee, which was basically just Karen and whichever bored husband she bullied into signing. The letter accused me of willful destruction of community property, harassment, intimidation, inciting violence, unlawful use of agricultural machinery as a weapon. I almost framed it, but then my eyes caught the fine print at the bottom, and the humor vanished instantly. It said, "This matter is now being pursued through civil and regulatory channels, including a formal appeal to the Lincoln County Planning Board regarding the status and designation of Road 12B. Road 12B. My road. The legal name of the dirt stretch that cut through my land." My stomach turned cold, because that sentence meant only one thing. Karen wasn't just angry. Karen wasn't just retaliating. She was attempting something far worse. She was trying to take my road. Legally. And if she succeeded, Beaver Summit wouldn't just trespass anymore. They'd own the access point to my entire ranch. I stood there in the barn, letter trembling slightly in my hand. Outside, the wind howled through the fence posts. The cattle shifted quietly. And for the first time in my life, I realized this wasn't just a neighborhood dispute. This was a land war. And Karen Oldridge had officially declared it. Karen tried to steal my land legally. The gate war was loud, viral, public. But what Karen Oldridge did next was quieter and far more dangerous. Because Karen wasn't done trying to block my road. She was trying to erase my ownership entirely. The morning after I got that HOA letter, I called my attorney, Lily Gray. She's small, sharp, and the kind of lawyer who smiles right before someone's life falls apart in court. Her voicemail was full. That alone told me everything. Beaver Summit wasn't just bothering me. They were launching a full assault. When Lily finally called back, her voice was clipped. "Took down a gate with a tractor, Dan. They built it on my road." I know. I saw the video. Of course she had. Half the state had. Then her tone shifted. "Listen carefully. They're not suing you for the gate." I frowned. "Then what are they doing?" Lily paused. "They're trying to take your road." The words hit like a sledgehammer. "What?" The HOA filed an appeal with the county planning board. They want Road 12 be reclassified as a shared community access route. I nearly dropped the phone. "That's insane. It's private property." "It is," Lily agreed. "But their argument is that HOA residents have used it continuously for years. They're claiming implied public servitude." I felt heat rising in my chest. They trespassed, so now they want ownership? That's exactly what they want. I stared out at the pasture. The dirt road visible beyond the fence line, winding through my land like it always had. It was more than gravel. It was my boundary. My separation from Beaver Summit. If the county bought their lie, I'd lose control forever. And Karen would win. "She can't just rewrite history," I growled. "She can if she manufactures enough paperwork," Lily said quietly. That was when I understood something. The gate wasn't the real attack. It was a test. Karen was testing how far she could push. And now she was pushing for the kill. That week, I pulled every document I owned. The original 1993 deed. Survey maps. Tax records. My father's notarized affidavit from back when he laid the crushed rock himself. Everything. Lily wanted it all. But Karen wasn't waiting. She escalated again. 2 days later, I was walking my lower creek line, checking erosion. The creek runs shallow through the south edge of my ranch, clean water, fed by snowmelt, used by cattle and wildlife. It's one of the most protected parts of my land. As I moved through the brush, something caught my eye. A flash of metal. half buried near the bank. I stepped closer, and my stomach twisted. A 5-gallon container. The lid cracked open. A dark, oily sludge leaking into the soil. The smell hit next. Diesel. Rot. Chemical sickness. I crouched down, heart hammering. Used motor oil. Dumped right beside my creek. My breath went shallow. I didn't even hesitate. I called the EPA hotline. 2 hours later, black trucks rolled onto my property. Agents stepped out with gloves, cameras, clipboards. One of them, a woman named Barnes, knelt beside the container. "This doesn't look like runoff," she murmured. "Because it isn't," I said tightly. "Somebody dumped it here." Barnes looked up at me. Her expression didn't say surprise. It said suspicion. And that made me furious. Because that was Karen's goal. Not to poison my land. To poison my credibility. If the EPA believed I'd contaminated my own creek, I could face fines, restrictions, even land use suspensions. And if that happened while the county was deciding the road status, Karen would have leverage. Barnes stood. "We'll take samples. Until then, this area is flagged for review." Red tape appeared across my creek like a crime scene. Agents walked my land like I was the suspect. When they left, the quiet felt wrong. I stood on the ridge staring down at the flagged creek bed. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Karen was playing chess. Gate. Legal appeal. Now environmental sabotage. She wasn't trying to inconvenience me. She was trying to suffocate me. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because I was angry enough to burn. By dawn, I had a plan. If Karen wanted to operate in shadows, I'd drag her into the spotlight. I pulled out my old GoPro, a long-range microphone, a body cam I used during calving season when things got dangerous. Then I called in a favor. His name was Simon. 25 years old, former journalism student, now full-time YouTuber. He documented small-town corruption. We met last year at a county water rights meeting, where he filmed a commissioner threatening to make a ranch disappear. Simon answered on the second ring. "Dan. Saw your gate video. Man, you're becoming a legend." "Not interested in legends," I said. "Interested in catching someone committing a crime." His tone sharpened instantly. "I'm listening." An hour later, Simon arrived with a drone case in hand and eyes bright like Christmas. "You're telling me the HOA president is actually named Karen?" "She sure is." He grinned. "That's going to be gold." We set up cameras at 3 locations. The old loading dock. The north tree line. A perch across from the destroyed gate ditch. All motion triggered. All aimed at the road. Then I needed one more thing. Bait. I drafted a message to Karen through the HOA portal. I wasn't supposed to have access. But one of her neighbors hated her enough to lend me their login. The message read, "Karen, I think we both know this is escalating beyond control. I'd rather settle like adults. I'm willing to compromise on the road if you're reasonable. Can we meet and talk?" I attached the location. An old grain shed just off Road 12B. Perfect visibility. Perfect audio. Perfect trap. I signed it. Daniel H. Then we waited. Karen didn't take long. 3 hours later, a black Escalade rolled up the dirt road. Simon whispered, "No way." "Oh yes," I muttered. Karen stepped out alone. Blazer. Sunglasses. The posture of someone who thinks courts exist for her convenience. She walked toward the shed like she was entering a board meeting. I was already inside, sitting on a hay bale, pretending to look tired. The cameras rolled silently. "Daniel," she said, voice dripping condescension. "I appreciate you reaching out. Let's keep it civil, I replied. She smiled. The kind of smile you wouldn't trust on a corpse. You understand, she began, you're only making this worse for yourself. I tilted my head. Am I? Yes, she said smoothly. The EPA report will stick. The county is getting pressure. Road 12B's future isn't really up for debate anymore. My blood ran cold. That road belongs to me. For now, she corrected. But public interest is powerful. Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice. If I were you, I'd stop waving chains around before someone gets arrested. I held my expression steady. You threatening me, Karen? She stepped forward. I'm advising you. Her tone sharpened. Because next time. She paused. It won't be oil in your creek. The air went electric. Simon's drone hovered outside, silent as a hawk. Karen kept going. It'll be a land surveyor with a court order. And when that happens, your tractors won't mean a damn thing. I let the silence stretch. Then I cleared my throat softly. And said the words that shattered her world. You're being recorded. Karen froze. The color drained from her face like a switch flipped off. Her eyes darted. She saw the tiny lens in the corner. The mic on the beam. The drone shadow outside. For the first time. Karen looked afraid. She didn't yell. Didn't threaten. Didn't argue. She turned sharply and walked out. Got into her Escalade. And slammed the door hard enough to trigger her own alarm. Simon exhaled. Oh my God. 3 hours later. The video was live. Simon edited fast, ruthless. Captions. Slow motion. Highlighted quotes. He titled it, HOA President Threatens to Seize Ranch Land, Caught on Tape. By midnight, it had 200,000 views. By morning, it was trending nationwide. Hashtag Free the Farmer. People flooded comments. HOAs are out of control. This is criminal. Protect private property. Local news crews showed up at my ranch gate. A state representative tweeted, private property rights aren't optional. We're watching Lincoln County. Karen went silent. Her emails stopped. The HOA's public statements vanished. And the county? They postponed the hearing on Road 12B. Just like that. The pressure cracked. I stood at the edge of my pasture watching the wind ripple through the grass. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to victory. But I knew better. Karen Oldridge wasn't finished. People like her don't retreat forever. They regroup. And when they come back, they don't come with gates. They come with lawsuits. And that was exactly what arrived next. The courtroom destroyed her. After the viral video, I thought Karen Oldridge would retreat. Disappear. Resign. Maybe crawl back into whatever suburban boardroom she came from. But people like Karen don't vanish. They don't accept defeat. They just change weapons. And when she came back, she didn't come with another gate. She came with a lawsuit. The court notice arrived on a Monday morning. Cream-colored envelope. Official seal. The smell of bureaucracy and spite. Beaver Summit HOA was suing me in civil court. They claimed I had destroyed designated community infrastructure, threatened residents, committed harassment, violated the neighborhood's right of reasonable access. They wanted $32,000 in damages and an injunction to prevent me from ever obstructing the road again. The road I owned. It would have been funny if it wasn't dangerous. I called Lily. She didn't sound surprised. They're desperate, she said. Karen thinks if she can bury you in legal pressure, you'll fold. I don't fold. I know, Lily replied. That's why we're going to finish her. That same afternoon, Lily filed a countersuit so thick it could have been used as a weapon. Trespassing, unlawful construction, defamation, attempted encroachment, fraudulent misrepresentation of land ownership, and one more: environmental tampering. Because the oil dump wasn't forgotten. Karen wasn't just playing petty HOA games anymore. She was flirting with criminal territory. But Lily wanted proof. Hard proof. Not suspicion. Not vibes. Something that could crack Karen's whole operation open. That's when Lily introduced me to Clint. Clint used to work in the county records office. Got fired years ago for leaking emails that exposed misuse of municipal funds. Now he worked freelance for attorneys. A paper ferret, Lily called him. Sniffing out buried dirt. Clint showed up at my ranch wearing a denim jacket and a grin like he already knew where the bodies were. I pulled the permit logs for Beaver Summit's gate, he said. And? He whistled softly. It gets worse, Dan. 3 days later, Clint returned with a folder. Lily opened it first. Then she swore. A real swear. The kind that made Earl choke on his coffee. The gate permit application had been filed 6 months ago. It included a certified boundary approval signature from a registered land surveyor named Daniel Cook. Clint tapped the paper. Problem is, Daniel Cook had been dead for 2 years. Lily's eyes narrowed. That signature isn't even close to the one on record. So Karen hadn't just overstepped. She hadn't just trespassed. She forged official documents to build a gate on land she didn't own. Lily leaned back slowly. This isn't civil stupidity anymore, she said. This is felony fraud. But Clint wasn't finished. He flipped to another page. While I was digging, I found something else. A utility plan. Buried in old zoning drafts. A thin PVC water line running through the edge of my property. Feeding Beaver Summit's sprinkler system. Unregistered. Unpermitted. No easement. No agreement. They'd been stealing water. For years. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. You're telling me they ran a water line through my land? Clint nodded. Quietly. Without telling the board. Without telling the county. Karen signed off herself. That evening, I walked the ridge near my old tool shed. Followed the trench line my father had dug decades ago. And there it was. A gray pipe snaking beneath my fence like a parasite. I took photos. Flagged it. Then I grabbed bolt cutters. And with one clean crunch, I cut it. Capped it. Tagged it with a metal marker. Unauthorized utility. Access revoked. That night, 3 of Beaver Summit's model home lawns went brown. By morning, Karen's emails went nuclear. Accusations. Manifestos. Calling me a terrorist again. She ended one with, "This land war is not over, Mr. Horsby." She was right. It was just reaching its climax. The courthouse in Lincoln County smells like stale coffee and worn-out justice. Beige walls. Flickering fluorescent lights. Benches that squeak like they're tired of holding people's hope. On the day of trial, I wore clean jeans. Polished boots. A flannel that didn't have grease stains. Earl looked me up and down. "You look like you're going to church." "I am," I muttered. Karen's funeral. The courtroom was packed. Half of Beaver Summit showed up, whispering behind manicured hands. Karen entered like a queen walking into her own coronation. Blazer. Perfect hair. Chin high. Smiling like she thought she'd already won. Her lawyer stood and began listing charges against me. Destruction. Intimidation. Disruption of community cohesion. I couldn't help it. I snorted. Karen shot me a glare sharp enough to cut steel. Then Lily stood. Calm. Precise. Deadly. She walked to the bench and dropped Clint's folder down with a thud. Your Honor, she said, this case is not about a gate. The judge, a wiry man in his 60s with a limp and sandpaper voice, raised an eyebrow. Then what is it about? Lily's eyes didn't flicker. It's about fraud, theft, and the illegal seizure of private land. The room shifted. Karen's smile twitched. Lily handed the judge the permit application. Exhibit A. The HOA constructed a gate on Mr. Horsby's private road using forged documentation. The judge glanced down, then frowned. This signature? Yes, Lily said. Belongs to Daniel Cook, a surveyor deceased since 2023. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Karen's lawyer stiffened. Lily called the county's actual surveyor to the stand. The man testified under oath. I never signed this. I never approved this boundary. I filed a complaint months ago. The judge's eyebrows rose. Karen's lawyer stammered. Internal miscommunication. The judge cut him off. Are you telling me your client submitted construction permits based on a document signed by a dead man? Silence. Karen blinked rapidly. Then Lily brought out the video footage. The judge watched Earl's backhoe ripping the gate from the ground. Rewound. Watched again. And then. He chuckled. You filmed this? Yes, sir, I said. Figured I'd need proof. The judge nodded slowly. Smart man. Karen's face tightened like wet drywall. Then Lily went for the throat. She called a forensic handwriting expert. The expert adjusted his glasses. Testified. Portions of this permit were filled out by Ms. Oldridge. The surveyor's signature was written by a different hand. It is a forgery. Karen's lawyer looked like he might faint. Karen opened her mouth. The judge held up a hand. You will speak when I am finished reading the statutes you may have violated. And then came the final blow. Clint's discovery. The illegal water line. Lily submitted photos of the pipe. Satellite irrigation data. Complaints from HOA residents whose lawns were dying. One resident had even emailed Karen demanding answers. And Karen never told the board. Never got a vote. She diverted water through my land. And hoped no one would notice. The judge recessed for lunch. When we returned, he dropped the hammer. Motion to dismiss the HOA's claims, granted. Karen's head snapped up. The judge continued. Mr. Horsby's countersuit is accepted in full. Karen's face drained. Then came words that tasted like justice. This court recommends an immediate criminal investigation into fraudulent permitting, unauthorized construction, environmental tampering, and misrepresentation of land ownership. Karen didn't speak. She just stared ahead, blinking like she was underwater. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Simon was already filming. Microphones shoved forward. I gave one simple statement. I don't start fights, I said. But I finished them. That clip made the evening news. Karen made the front page for all the wrong reasons. 3 weeks later, the final ruling arrived. Karen Oldridge was formally charged with falsifying official documents, misuse of HOA funds, unauthorized utility installation, criminal misrepresentation, attempted property theft under color of law. The HOA was ordered to pay me $380,000 in damages. Special assessments meant every Beaver Summit resident would pay for Karen's war. The county officially confirmed. Road 12B was private. Exclusive. Mine. No easement. No public access. Karen resigned the same day. No speech. No goodbye. Just a 2-line email. I am stepping back for personal well-being. Yeah. Behind bars, maybe. 6 months later. Beaver Summit is quieter. Humbled. The HOA board is under audit. Nobody wants leadership anymore. Funny how that works. And my ranch? Peaceful again. I replaced my old sign at the entrance with a freshly welded metal plate. Private road. Trespassers will be recorded, reported, and sued into the dirt. Underneath, in smaller letters. We've done it before. Earl brought beer and lawn chairs. We sat on the ridge at sunset. Wind in the grass. Cattle lowing in the distance. No joggers. No SUVs. No inflatable pools. Just quiet. The way land is meant to be. Earl glanced over. You think it's really over? I looked down at road 12B. Empty. Solid. Untouchable. Yeah, I said. At least until someone else gets the bright idea to mess with a man who owns his fence. I smirked. And his fight.